Good evening.
Wow.
What an introduction. Thank you, Betty. Makes us feel important.
Put her in my pocket and take her with me. It's a delight to be here. We are the Storytelling Sims. Betty did not tell you that some of you that will need to be reminded of this, that I'm Wayne.
I guess that makes me old what's-her-name, doesn't it?
And,
My friends call me Jane, though.
it's a delight to do the limelight again. We always enjoy doing this. We enjoy splitting our time between here and the mountains. Of course, this is still home, and we maintain St. Augustine as a home base, but we slip off and spend as much time as we can in the mountains. One of the beauties of being unemployed is that we don't have to have a time frame. We can just come and go as we want to, and we do that and enjoy it very much. But anyhow, we're delighted to be here. We're going to try to enlighten you a bit tonight about some things that we have seen and some things we have done and some places we have been. And we would like to remind you, as we always do, that when we tell stories, that they're all true. Or could be true.
Or ought to be.
So bear that in mind as we relate to you some of the things that we reflect upon. Particularly, we reflect first of all on the Appalachians. Oh, what a wonderful place to have a part-time home. But our home is in Black Mountain, a small community just out east of Asheville. And from our upstairs, and I don't want to make you jealous or anything, but from our bedroom upstairs in our condo, we look to the south and see the Shenandoah Mountains. We look across the golf course and see the Blue Ridge and the Smokies off in the distance. We look to the right and we can actually see the parkway up on the Craggy Mountain Way as it comes across.
Craggy Dome.
Oh, it's hard living, I'll tell you that. But we do enjoy the mountains. But one of the things we like most about the mountains is the purity of the beautiful mountain humor.
That's right, we do. And as funny as it is sometimes, it's important to remember that mountain humor is firmly entrenched in a day-to-day lifestyle that is unaffected by political correctness.
So we'd like to tell you a few stories about the mountains. Now up in Yancey County, that's just up north of Black Mountain, where we live. Up in Yancey County, there's an old fellow named Mr. Earl, Mr. John Earl. He's a bastion of the county there. Been on the school board for 3 or 4 terms. He served as a county commissioner for a couple of terms. He's an old farmer, a deacon in the Baptist church. I mean, if anybody wants to do anything in Yancey County, they come to see Mr. Earl. Well, Mr. John one morning is, last winter, one of those mean winter mountain mornings, and it was cold. And Mr. John could hear that Norfolk and Southern Railroad engine just hooting its horn as it came up the valley, heading up the mountain. The railroad track runs just beside his pasture out there. Seemed like it was making more noise than usual that morning. Well, a bit later in the morning when it warmed up, got up to about 10 degrees, Mr. John went out and walked around his pasture, and that's when he discovered he couldn't find his prize bull. I'm telling you right now, if you're a farmer and you live in the mountains and you got a head of cattle and your prize bull comes up missing, it's time for sad singing and slow dancing.
That's right, and the longer that bull hung out and didn't come home, the more agitated Mr. Earl got. So finally he took himself downtown, hired himself a lawyer, and brought suit against those railroad people for running over his bull. Well, the trial was short, but it was colorful and eloquent, and there were glowing arguments on both sides, especially from the railroad lawyer. So finally the judge said he'd heard enough, and he was going to take everything under advisement and retire to his chambers, and when he came back, he would have a ruling. Well, the recess lasted for a while, and then all the people were called back in the courtroom, and the judge came in. He said he figured it was partly the fault of Mr. Earl because he didn't keep his bull pinned up the way he ought to. And then he said the railroad people also were partially responsible because apparently it was their train that killed the bull. And so his ruling was that Mr. Earl would receive only half the amount of money that he had filed suit for.
Good judge made the ruling and recessed court, and everybody left the courtroom. Mr. John went out and got on the elevator. The only elevator in the courthouse. In fact, there's only 2 elevators in the entire county. The other one's over at the bank building. Anyhow, Mr. John got on the elevator, punched the down button, which was rather useless because there's only 2 floors to the courthouse, and they were on the 2nd floor in the courtroom. Anyhow, he punched the down button, and just as the door started to close, here comes Mr. Sullivan Sneed, the attorney for the railroad company, hopping into the elevator car. Now, I don't need to tell you about Sully Sneed. You've seen him a million times, and you've heard him a million times. So your own mind can put into picture form what this distinguished barrister was.
Well, that elevator door had hardly shut before Mr. Sneed could contain himself no longer. He puffed up and he said, "Mr. Earl, I gotta fess up to you. I never in this world expected to get out of that courtroom only after paying you half the value of your bull. Why, there's no way we could have won. When that train hit your bull, the engineer was asleep at the switch and the fireman was in the caboose drunk as Cooter Brown. We didn't have one credible witness." And then he had the gall to say, "Mr. Earl, I just flat bluffed you."
Mr. John looked a little bit surprised for a moment, and then he collected his thoughts. "So let me tell you one thing, young fella. I had my own doubts about winning that case, especially when my bull came up to the barn this morning."
But you know, there are people over in Swain County, North Carolina, that would swear this next story is true. And who am I to question the veracity of a bunch of hard-working, God-fearing folks, especially if they chew tobacco and carry shotguns?
Stories about Eddie Ray and TJ, a couple of mountain boys. These boys came from the mold in which all good country mountain boys was born. I mean, they had been good friends since birth. They had hoed cotton together, they had chopped corn, they had pulled the grass out of the middle of the tobacco rows, they had climbed pear trees and picked peaches, they had swum in Hell's Creek butt naked. I mean, they'd been the best of friends their entire life, all 12 years I think.
Well, Eddie Ray and TJ climbed up Ball Man's Knob, and just as they were coming around the west face, they discovered the most beautiful open area sloping downward, covered with brand new, fresh green grass. Well, nothing would do. But those 2 boys ripped off their clothes and started taking turns sliding buck naked down that slope into a pool of cool mountain water. Must have been sliding down for quite some time. They'd stirred up quite a few of Mother Nature's critters out there, because just as TJ came sliding down to do another skinny dip run to the creek, a copperhead snake reached out and bit him on the backside. TJ slid on down to the water, grabbed his behind and hollered, Eddie Ray, I done bit in the butt by a copperhead. Run down and get Doc Hopkins and get him up here as fast as you can." Well, then he grabbed his clothes and he took off running down the mountain as fast as he could. He ran on into town, ran to the doctor's office, went in there hollering for the doc to come out, hollering, "Come on out here, Doc." Told him what happened. Poor old doctor, he was as busy as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. He had a waiting room full of people. He said, "I can't leave here now, Eddie Ray." He said, "I got a woman in the back about to drop a baby." He said, "But I'm going to tell you what to do." He said, "You go back up the mountain as quick as you can. Take out your pocket knife. Lance the bite area and suck out the poison. Then I want you to bring TJ back down here as quick as you can. Now tell me what I just told you, son." Eddie says, "Okay, Doc, you want me to go back up the mountain as fast as I can. You want me to get out my pocket knife. You want me to lance the bite area. And you want me to suck out the poison. And then you want me to bring TJ back down here to your office as quick as I can." Doc says, "That's right, son. Now go on."
Eddie Ray walked out of the doctor's office and saw her sauntered down the street, thinking very seriously about the instructions the good doctor had just given him. Got down toward the corner, and there's the old general store where the guys all hang out. He went in, got himself a knee-high orange Coca-Cola, Sat there and drank it, talked to the guys a moment or two, and then he kept on walking down the street heading up toward the mountain. In the meantime, TJ's back on the side of the mountain filled with agitation and anxiety. He's wondering where in the world Eddie Ray is. He's got a snake bite on his butt, and he's worried about where the young fella is. Well, all of a sudden, he sees Eddie Ray coming through the bushes just the other side of the creek, and he is real happy. But then, he sees that Eddie Ray's by himself. And he hollers, "Eddie Ray, where's old Doc Hopkins?"
Well, Eddie Ray came running up the slope. He said, "TJ, I got back up here as quick as I could. I got good news and I got bad news. Which one you want first?"
Eddie, TJ said, "I ain't in the mood to do any negotiating. I've been waiting on you too long. For goodness sakes, give me the good news."
And Eddie said, "Well, I ran down to town, just like I told you, fast as I could. I found the doctor's office, went in there, and TJ, you is in luck. Because the good doc was in, and he told me what to do."
For God's sakes, Eddie, tell me, what did the doctor say?
And Eddie said, "Well, TJ, that's the bad news. Because he said you was going to die."
Over in Watauga County, now that's right up next to the Tennessee state line, in case you didn't. Watauga's up in the mountain. In fact, the Blue Ridge Parkway runs right through Watauga County. Oh, farmer up there that raises hens. Fellow's name's Alvin Ledbetter. Don't make any difference what his name is, that's the second one. Fact is, Mr. Ledbetter raises hens, and he's making a pretty good living doing it.
That's right. He was getting along right smart, as they would say. He was a very proud man, glad of everything he'd accomplished. He enjoyed his farm, enjoyed walking about, looking at things, and he would enjoy visiting the hen house just as much as he would the barn. So one afternoon he was out walking around, stopped in the chicken house, and discovered that one of his hens was sickly. Well, he didn't think too much about it till he went back the next day and discovered her sitting straight up on the nest, dead as a doorknob. Things kind of went downhill after that. More chickens got sick, and by the end of the week, 17 had died. So he called up the State Department of Agriculture over there in Raleigh, and he told them about his predicament. And they told him that they couldn't really do anything for him on the phone. What he needed to do was box up one of his dead chickens and send it to him over there at the lab, where they could do an analysis on it, and then they'd get back to him.
Mr. Alvin went down to the barn, went out behind the barn to the chicken coop, started looking around through the Dominickers and the Rhode Island Reds and the old Banner Roosters hanging out around down there. Finally found what appeared to be the sickest hen he had, so he picked up the old hen, walked out, wrung its neck, put it in a box, iced it down, and shipped it to the State Department of Agriculture in Raleigh. Less than a week later, here comes a letter back. I mean, Mr. Ledbetter is anxious to see what's in that letter. It's an official-looking letter. Opens it up. Here's that beautiful letterhead embossed logo at the top of the seal of the state of North Carolina. Department of Agriculture, Secretary of Agriculture's name. One corner has got the email address and the website address, and the other side's got the phone number, and it's got the fax number. I mean, the whole shooting match is on that piece of paper. And Mr. Ledbetter is anxious to see what it is, because he wants to know what their answer is to his trouble with his chickens.
Dear Mr. Ledbetter, we are in receipt of the chicken which you sent to us boxed in ice by overnight express. The best minds in our department have analyzed and examined the specimen, and we have reached a consensus. The analysis is that your chicken died of a broken neck.
Now you know why we like mountain humor. It's my kind of folks. I want you to know right now.
Never a dull minute.
I guess one of the most beloved storytellers in the nation's storytelling history passed away recently, and she was, some of the folks, I won't call any names, Billy Ross, but some of the folks here will remember that first Gamble Rogers Storytelling Festival when we had this big, amiable, beautiful lady of color, just a tremendous, the nation's best storyteller sitting on stage.
It was actually the second St. Augustine storytelling.
Should have been the first because I said the first.
Well, Jackie Torrance is certainly one of the most important people involved in the revival of storytelling in the United States, which has been going on now for about 35 years. She was a North Carolina resident. There are a bunch of wonderful storytellers in North Carolina. It seemed that last year just wasn't our luck in terms of keeping storytellers because we lost Ray Hicks, who was an American institution coming out of Appalachia with his old English accent telling the traditional Jack tales. And then there, of course, was Jackie Torrance, who people all over the country called the Story Lady. She was a wonderful storyteller.
Jackie had such a great group of stories she told. There's one story that Jane loves, and she's been wanting to tell it, and finally tonight she's going to tell it in front of a responsive and receptive audience. I think you're going to enjoy it. I'm going to sit down and get a drink of water, unless that's vodka, and let you tell the story of Sweet Annie.
Okay, I'm going to take a swallow first. Mr. and Ms. Roberts had been married a long time before God sent them a baby. She was a sweet baby. She was a sweet little girl. Why, she was even a sweet teenager. Her mama called her Sweet Annie. Well, because they were so old when they got Sweet Annie, it wasn't long before they were ailing. But Sweet Annie stayed home and she took care of them until they went on to meet their maker. A little while after that, one night, Annie's sitting in the parlor, and she's just rocking and listening to the radio, and she says to herself, you know, my life is perfect. I don't really need anything, except I would like to have a husband. And then she got to thinking about how she might get a husband, and she decided that the best way would be at church, because that's where she would find a hard-working, honorable sort of man. So Annie took herself down and she joined the biggest church in town because she figured that would increase her chances. Well, every Sunday Annie would put on her finest, prettiest outfit, and she would prance down that aisle all the way to the front of the church and sit right on the front pew. And all the available men would watch her go down that aisle, and they would think, she sure is sweet. She sure is pretty. She probably wouldn't have anything to do with the likes of me. So after a while, Annie decided she thought she probably would join the choir, because there were some bachelors in the choir. So she started going to choir practice every Wednesday night, and every Sunday morning she's right up there in the pew with that hymnal in her hand, singing. Sweetest voice you ever heard, like an angel. And all the bachelors in the choir, they'd say, ooh, that Sweet Annie, she sure can sing. She has the nicest voice. She is so sweet and looks so sweet. She probably wouldn't be interested in anybody like me. Well, it wasn't too long after that, the choir had a meeting. They were going to vote on whether or not to keep the choir director. It was a customary thing. They did it every year. They'd had the same choir director for a long time. And just as they were going to take the vote, Sweet Annie raised her hand and she said, you know, I don't think this choir director gives us enough songs that we can pat our feet to, or snap our fingers, or clap our hands. I would like for us to have a choir director that gave us music that we could really enjoy and get into. I think we need a new choir director. Well, the people in the choir, they looked at her and they thought, well, Sweet Annie, she looks so sweet. She talks so sweet. Surely she's not going to tell us anything wrong. So they voted to get a new choir director. And not too long after that, the congregation had a meeting to determine if they would continue with the same pastor. There again, it was only a formality. They'd had the same preacher a long time. Just as they were going to vote, that little hand went up. And Sweet Annie said, excuse me, but, I think this preacher shouts too much. And he screams and stomps up and down in front of the pulpit. And I think we need a preacher that tells us what we want to hear and talks sweet to us. And the people in the congregation looked at her, and they thought about what she said, and they figured, well, she looks so sweet and she talks so sweet. My goodness, she wouldn't tell us anything that's wrong. So they voted to get rid of the preacher. Got a new one. 20 years went by. Every year they got a new choir director, and every year they got a new preacher. And sweet Annie hadn't found a husband yet. She was getting old. So finally the day came when the seat in the choir loft was empty, because sweet Annie had gone on to meet her just reward. Well, now, there are some people that believe there's a place where you go after you die, and you wait there to go to heaven or to hell. And sweet Annie's standing up there waiting, and here comes this big, beautiful, ornate white chariot covered with white and gold, and it was pulled by big, beautiful white horses sparkling in the light. And this tall archangel got down off the chariot, and he stood there, unrolled a roll, and began to call names. And the people around her got on the chariot. And he got to the bottom of the list, rolled the roll back up, started to get on the carriage, and she went over to him and she said, excuse me, you didn't call my name. And he said, I don't have any more names on my list. Who are you? And she said, oh, I'm Sweet Annie Roberts. And he said, well, your name's not on my list. And she said, oh, but it must be. And he looked at her, and she was. Sweet talking person. She looked so sweet. He thought, oh, there must be a mistake. So he said, well, come on. And she climbed on the chariot. Well, when they got to the Golden Gate, sweet Annie got down off that chariot. She marched right over to St. Peter, stuck out her hand, and she said, St. Peter, I've just always wanted to meet you. He just looked at her. He said, who are you? And she said, oh, I'm Sweet Annie Roberts. And he looked at his list, and he said, I don't have your name on my list. And she said, oh, but you must. I went to church every Sunday, and I sang in the choir, and I took care of my mama and my daddy. And he looked at her, and he thought, well, there must be a mistake. So he told her to go on in. Well, Annie loved it in heaven. It was just the sort of place that was just fine for her. And one day she was sitting around with the angels, and they were talking, the way angels do. And one of the angels said, I get so tired. I wish I could get these wings adjusted, or maybe pull them off once in a while, because they hurt my shoulders. And Annie looked at her, and she said, well, I don't know why we need these wings anyway. It's not as though we go anywhere and we never fly. Why don't we all take off our wings and put them over here out of the way in a pile? And so that's what they did. And then she said, and about these halos, they're always sliding down on one side or the other. They're always, you have to fix them. And she said, and besides that, a girl can't wear a hat when she's wearing a halo. So all the angels took off their halos, put them over in a pile next to the wings. Well, that afternoon, God and Gabriel were walking through heaven. It was a beautiful heavenly day. Sunshine, blue skies, fluffy white clouds. There were flowers everywhere. The birds were flying and singing everywhere. God was walking along, enjoying the aroma of the honeysuckle that had just come into bloom. When something caught his eye. And he said, Gabriel, what is that white mass over there? And Gabriel said, I don't know, God. And then God said, and what is that shiny looking thing next to the white? Gabriel said, I don't know, but I'll find out. And when he came back, he said, those are wings, God. God said, what? Wings and halos. Whose halos and wings? Gabriel said, everybody's, Lord. God said, who told my angels that they could pull off their wings and their halos? Gabriel said, I don't know, Lord, but I'll find out. And that's how Sweet Annie Roberts got called before God. He said to her, who told you that you could tell my angels that they could take off their wings and their halos? And she said, well, you know, those wings are very uncomfortable. They're heavy. And we never go anywhere. We don't fly. And he said, and she said, and the halos, they were not altogether right either. And of course, you know, she had flowers woven all through her hair at this point. She said, I can't wear a hat with a halo on. God said, what is your name again? She said, Sweet Annie Roberts. He got down his big book. He went down one page and up the next. Down one page and up the next. Down one page and up the next. He looked at her and he said, you are in the wrong place. And she said, oh my, are you telling me to go to hell? And that's how Sweet Annie ended up back at the waiting place. So here comes this big, mean, growling, smoking, nasty dragon up out of the depths of the earth, rumbling and roaring, and he stops at the waiting place with his container on the back. And Sweet Annie climbed aboard. A couple of days after that, the devil was in his office working, and he started shivering. And then he noticed he could hardly see what he was doing. He said, I've never been cold in my life, and now I can't see in this hole. And he got up and he went out and he said, somebody better come in here and tell me what's going on in this place. I can't see anything, and I'm cold. And one of the imps, you know, the royal upper echelon imps, came in and he said, well, Your Hotness, there's this woman, and she told us that we didn't need to run all those furnaces at the same time. And then she said it was too bright, so we cut back some of the fires. And the devil said, bring her to me. And that's how Sweet Annie had audience with the devil. He said, who told you that you could have my furnaces turned down and my fires extinguished? And she said, well, I just figured it was too hot in here. And I thought one furnace would keep everybody warm enough. And she said, and besides that, there was too much light. A girl couldn't get a night's sleep with all that light. Devil looked at her. He took in what she said. He said, Sweet Annie, you're my kind of girl. And they say, that's how Sweet Annie got herself a hell of a fella.
let's set the record straight. I'm from up north. He said, now you're wondering, because this next story is going to be about why it is that Yankees seem to have trouble understanding what happens down south. You see, I came from up north. I was born and raised up north, North Alabama. Spent most of my growing life in North Alabama. Didn't ever meet a Yankee. Didn't know what a Republican or a Catholic was until I came to Florida. And that's when I met some of all of those people. And that's when I began to see that the Yankees were having trouble understanding what the Southerners were saying. You know, and I guess the best way to explain it is in law enforcement. For example, we all know it's the police. They call it the police. Up yonder, they call it a siren. We know it's a siren. And every good policeman rides not a motorcycle, he rides a motorcycle. So you can imagine the problem that there is in communicating when the Yankee tourist comes down here to the Southland and he finds himself accidentally exceeding the legally posted speed limit, which is yonder on a sign beside the road, and that's when Elroy Bubba Smith turns on his siren, hops on his motorcycle, and pulls him over to the side of the road. Goes up and taps on the window. Yankee tourist rolls the window down. Bubba says something that we would all understand. You and I would know what he was saying when he said, "Let me see your driver's license." Now we all know what a driver's license is, or are, as the case may be. Tourist wife says, "What do you say, Bob?" We know how to understand that kind of talk. But talking, that reminds me though, speaking of motorcycles, as I was growing up in the foothills of the Appalachians, you paying attention, Betty? As I was growing up there in the Tennessee Valley of North Alabama, hill country all about, one of the most interesting things I remember is Frank Fuller and his Harley Davidson motorcycle. It was the pride of the valley. Everybody wanted to get on that motorcycle. And one year, just as we laid the cotton picking season away, and that was a big event up there because you had to get the cotton picked before it got too cold, and schools, in fact, schools had a let out. They didn't start until late so you could finish up the cotton picking. It was a big occasion. Finished up the cotton picking, had a great big get-together down at Trinity, there with the gin, and we was all having a great time, and everybody was enjoying themselves when Frank Fuller come up on his Harley Davidson hog motorcycle. Stopped that motorcycle there on the side of the road, and that old fishtail antenna whooping on the back of it like this, and Frank's got off and said, "Anybody want to go for a ride?" Well, that was the cue for all the girls, because they like to hop on that buddy seat back there and go for a ride on those roads up and down the roads there around Trinity. And so they started riding, and they'd ride, and they'd ride, and they'd ride, and they had a lot of fun. And it began to get pretty cool toward the shank of the evening, and as the sun was just about to set, and Frank said, "This is going to be the last ride," and some pretty little thing got on the back of that motorcycle and wrapped her arms around him, and he took off down the road and came back in a minute or two. And when he got back, Sue Ellen Fillmore came sauntering over. She blinked them eyes, and she looked at him, and she said, "Frank, I sure would like to take a ride on your motorcycle." But Sue Ellen was standing there with that sun glinting in that golden hair of hers, and that sweet voice ringing out. And there was no way in this world that Frank was going to turn down the opportunity to oblige Sue Ellen. Frank said, "In fact, you know, Sue Ellen, it's getting pretty late in the afternoon and it's getting pretty cool. You better take my jacket and put it on because you might get cold as we go riding." And so he took off his leather jacket and And they said, you know what? Just to be safe, here, you turn around, let me put the jacket on backwards, and that way you can take the collar and put it up over your face, and it won't get you too cold that way. You'll have a little better protection if it's on backwards and zipped up on the back. She said, all right, Frank. So she got that motorcycle jacket zipped up, and she hopped on that buddy seat, and she lapped them arms around him and snuggled up close to him, and he turned he turned over there, and he looked in the handlebars, and no windshield on those Harley Davidsons. Back in those days, you just sort of pick the bugs out of your teeth and move on. And he hit that starter. She said, turn the switch, stupid, and he did. And they went off down the road then in great glory. And here's Frank riding that motorcycle as fast as he can down those gravel roads, and Sue Ellen is sitting back behind him. She's just hanging on for dear life, grasping him as hard as she can. And Frank hit one of them curves, and lo and behold, ladies and gentlemen, that motorcycle and that Harley went right out from between his legs as he went right across the handlebars, crashing into the embankment on the other side. In a few minutes, here comes that state policeman. He's got the siren wailing on his old car. And you know how those old-time sirens were. You remember those days? Here comes that old siren and that car wheeling up there, and this state trooper comes up there, and he hops out, and he looks at the carnage all about him. And he says, oh my God. He says, can anybody tell me what happened here? Well, Albert and Aaron Abercrombie, a couple of young fellows, were walking down the road, and Albert said, yes, sir, Mr. Policeman, I can tell you what happened. Me and Aaron were on our way back from fishing. We've been down under the lake. We've been catching catfish. Had a good... He says, would you please stop telling me about that and tell me what happened here with this carnage? And Albert said, yes, sir. He said, what happened was Mr. Frank came around that curve too fast with that motorcycle. And when he did, the wheels went out from under him on the gravel, and he hit that embankment, and Mr. Frank went right through the handlebars, because it was not the windshield up there, Mr. Officer, and he crashed into that bank, and I think it killed him immediately. Said Miss Sue Ellen, she was all right. To me and Aaron, we turned her head around.
So much for all that.
We were not going to do this story, but then we decided there's a couple of people that asked about doing another Gamble story. So we're going to do a quick tribute to Gamble. We love to do Gamble tributes. We do it with their blessing and with the hope that you'll follow up on the late Gamble Rogers and pick up some of his tapes or his CDs and enjoy some of the true artistry of the greatest wordsmith that ever came tumbling down the road. But anyhow, Gamble is a great memory to all of us, and this we do with all of our love. It's our tribute to Gamble Rogers.
Our friend Gamble Rogers is the troubadour emeritus of Appalachia County, Florida, where Snipes Ford is the county seat and center of literacy. That is to say that everybody knows what everybody else has been doing, but they still read the newspaper to find out who got caught.
Appalachia County is principally known for its outsized number of rural alchemists, folks who spend the bulk of their waking hours puzzling out novel ways in which they can bleach out their used coffee grounds to sell to tourists out on the interstate as grits.
Well, that goes a long way toward explaining why Northerners don't give a hoot for Southern cooking.
Now, Gamble was a great storyteller, and we do these stories because we do Gamble's actual words. We can't do it as well as Gamble did, but we do Gamble's own words, and that's why we enjoy doing these stories. Gamble had a great stable of characters. He had a plethora of characters. Characters like Downwind Dave,
Narcissa Nonesuch,
Chester the Molester,
Agamemnon Jones,
Still Bill. Oh, Still Bill. Still Bill was sorry.
Oh, he was sorry. But you know, it takes a compassionate man to covet a three-legged dog. Though it takes a sorry son of a gun to name that dog Flat Tire.
Bill had been grievously overserved by an apprentice bartender down to the Terminal Tavern, such that temporary blindness ensued. good doctor had prescribed.
That's right, he did. He told Bill, he said, you can't do nothing but rest your eyes for 2 weeks. You gotta sit home and listen to the TV.
Well, the first thing the next morning, here's Bill out on the streets of Snipes Ford, blind as a bat, bumping into parking meters. That three-legged chihuahua running interference for him. Bill, all the while trying to appear very casual, was eating himself an almond joy. Bill and Flat Tire went on down the road, went down by the Baby Grand Theater, down by Gentilla's Pawn Shop, down by the Unitarian Church.
That's the one with the lightning rod on the steeple. Agamemnon Jones says those Unitarians trust the Almighty in all things except matters of electricity.
Bill and Flat Tire move on down the street, go down by Penguin and Lance's old dry goods store. It's all boarded up now. Then they come upon Arundale's Purina feed store.
That's where Agamemnon Jones and all those philosophers hang out, swapping those tales and telling those lies. There's a blackboard on the end of Arundale's where ordinary people post their orders for feed and seed. But every once in a while, the more raffish members of the community sneak in there and post dubious sentiments.
April 14, I like grills. Signed Penrod. April 15, it's girls, stupid. Signed Narcissa. April 16, all right, Narcissa, I like girls. Signed Penrod. April 17, how about us? Signed the Grills.
Well, Bill and Flat Tire move on down the street. They reach the corner. Bill hooks his foot over the curb, cocks his head. He's listening for a break in the traffic. He's too independent to accept help from any man. He's just going to hear him a hole and surge right on through.
Big Great Dane comes up, knocks Flat Tire out of the way, sniffs Bill's knee, raises his leg, and hoses Bill down from mid-thigh to his ankle. Well, Bill just reaches down and starts feeding his almond joy to the big dog.
That's too much for the rest of the boys. Agamemnon comes down off the loading ramp. He says, Bill, you're crazy. That dog has just irrigated your long clothes, and there you go sharing sweets with him.
Shut up, Agamemnon. I'm just trying to find out which end his head's on, so I kick his butt.
Sorry, this is still Bill, feeling his way into his brother-in-law's restaurant saying,
Who owns that Big Great Dane out there?
Well, I do, a stranger answered. Yes, I tethered my beast out there just a moment ago. Fine animal he is. Been to obedience school. Why, he wouldn't harm man, woman, or...
He's dead.
What do you mean, he's dead?
Well, my dog killed him.
Good grief, man. What kind of animal is it?
It's a chihuahua.
How can a chihuahua kill a Great Dane?
I believe he got stuck in his throat.
Well, as our good friend Gamble Rogers always used to say,
Sorry is as sorry does.